Yeah, again, I do want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. The topic is memoir, healing through memoir writing. And I'm very open with how the discussions go. If you want to stray, if you want to talk about your own personal experience, however this goes, absolutely up to you. We usually go 2 hours. We had a panel discussion that went 4 hours the other night. So your time is whatever you want to do.
I've been telling people that it would be about a half an hour.
Yeah, so and that's fine too. You can go and come as you need. You don't have
right
to.
Ahead, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Richie and I will reschedule our time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'd like everyone to take a moment to introduce themselves and introduce which book, which memoir you've written. If you want to touch a little bit on the subject matter, however you want to handle this. Charlene, we'll start with you.
I have a mixed book here, which is probably extremely accurate to my way of doing things. Medicine Buddha, Medicine Mind contains a little bit of my own history as someone who was raped and tortured when I was 16, and who has completely healed from that to the point where a psychiatrist said, we don't know how you did this. So part of my life mission and my life work is to spread the ideas, and this is one of them, of what it was that helped me to completely revamp and get to the place where I can talk about it. It's awful. It happens to so many people, but I'm not in it. I'm not identified to it anymore. And so this is, although this is nonfiction about the processes of why the brain can be healed completely from these experiences under the right circumstances, it also contains a little of a memoir from me. So that's kind of my interest in memoir and in healing.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, go ahead and introduce your book and your story.
Oh my God, you want to go me to go?
Yeah.
Well, my name is Richard White. I've been an author for probably about 5 or 6 years. I got into memoir writing just recently with my brand new book, What Happened to Me. It is a book about my fight and defeat of post-traumatic stress disorder without medication, where I face the trauma head on. And I face the trauma without any type of medication at all. I actually have my own, I guess, devices that I use for medication and therapy, which I talk about in the book. Most importantly, coffee, nicotine, and music. I have quit smoking. I'm 24 days smoke-free.
Great. Good for you, Richard.
So I got a vapor thingy. I puff on that thing. It gets me the nicotine for now. This next week, I'm actually taking a big step in cutting the nicotine level down from 12 milligrams to 6. So I'm working step by step to get rid of that feat. It's going to be really tough because for the last 20 years, it has been, I actually state right in the book, not to give everything away, but right in the book I say, and it's something I say all the time, my coffee is my Lazepam and my cigarettes are my Prozac. And I've said that for 20 years. And when I say it, I mean it. People think I'm joking, but I really truly mean it. I've used the coffee for so long as a medication that I can drink 2 full cups of coffee at 12:30 in the morning, 1 a.m., and go right to bed. It's not an issue for me. And the same with when I get really stressed out, when the stressors hit, 1 cigarette, and it changes my mood completely.
Yeah.
So that's what it's about. I've just started a new website to kind of go into it a little further. And I think with the reaction that I've gotten from this, it's a very small ebook. It's not that large at all. But with the reaction I've gotten from it so far already and the positive feedback I've gotten, I actually plan to go further and write a second kind of a, not necessarily a prequel, but something that dives into more of the medication therapy that I do use. Mm-hmm. With the coffee, and the music is another thing that I use. That's more or less my therapy. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, I can't go to therapy and I can't take medication. Mentally, I've got something in there that says, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
And it's in the book, my reasons behind it all. So I don't want to give it all away there, but that's really what it is, what memoir is for me. And so I'm using it, I guess, to help myself heal. But I've got a lot of friends that also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. And I think some of my story, how I fight through it without the medication, I think can give some stepping stones or building blocks for those, people out there that really need something else other than the medication and therapy, because there's so many people out there that won't go because of whatever reason. And lo and behold, we end up looking at the military side of things, 23 suicides per day. That's only in 21 states. The big pandemic here that they discuss and they say on the news and on the web and stuff about 23 a day is only actually talking about 21 states that reported veterans that have, people that have committed suicide were either active service members or veterans. Not all 50 states have reported that. That's 23 soldiers per day on average that are killing themselves due to post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression from being in Iraq and Afghanistan. But and they're saying that, but they've gone all the way back to World War II, I believe, in some of this study. And it's a pandemic. It's something that has been happening right along and nothing has been done about it. The VA isn't prepared to handle it. They don't know how to handle it because they're there for medical and for physical trauma. Surgeons and this, that, and the other thing. And they really don't have the capabilities they are starting to get them now. But in the last because of the last 10 years, they've seen such a switch from the veterans coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan, how bad the internal mental trauma has become. So they are just now getting the veteran suicide hotline out. They've got some other stuff out there and other programs. I myself, certain programs don't agree with because they're not doing them correctly. And like, part of my thing with the therapy is I can't sit with a person that is in a suit and tie that's never experienced anything in their life except for a college degree.
Yeah. Richie, if I can jump in here just for a moment before we want to get also to the other panelists here. But I'm aware, and I'm one of my focuses is always to try to put the positive spin on things. I'm a little bit of a sunshine girl, but I do know that one of the research projects that I'm aware of said that the people who actually had PTSD coming out of war, and keep in mind that my life partner was in Nam, and then was a cop, and then was in undercover for 23 years. So I live with someone who might otherwise have PTSD. It's very close, plus my own, and so on. And we don't, we've got a really good thing going. But what I'm trying to say is what I understand from the research is that PTSD affects the part of the population who were damaged before they went into the war. It affects them the most. And so the compilations of depression and anxiety, although I am not in favor of war, but that's number one thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is that I'm also aware of two areas where vets are actually serving as tremendous research subjects and volunteers. And one is in medicine, which the Israeli army has, that help you, it wipes out your memories so you don't have them. You don't have those bad memories. We actually have it here in North America. And Kathleen, you may know more about this, but I've spoken with a woman who was a nurse in the emergency department who told me that they will use that particular drug to help people if they are in severe pain, to help them not remember how bad it really was. Now that is a whole two-sided question, but we know that there's some help going there. Plus, I also know, because of my world of visualization and how the mind can create and dissolve, that there is a lot of research going on with vets who have PTSD in helping them go into whatever the structure was that caused the PTSD through virtual reality, helping them to bring down, they get to be in control of those moments and bring it down. They tell the experimenter when to stop. So there are incredibly important areas where research is being done. Is there enough? No. And I am I'm heartsick to hear of the numbers that you're putting out, but I just wanted to introduce that there are other things that are being done, and God love us all is all I can say.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Irene, go ahead and introduce your book yourself.
Okay, hi. Hi, everyone. So my name is Irene Allison, and I co-authored a book with my mother. Here it is. I don't know if you can see it. And this is called Stay Breathe With Me, The Gift of Compassionate Medicine. My mother was the coordinator and head nurse of the first palliative care unit in Canada. And this book is based on her life's wisdom of what she learned through palliative care. And the book is full of stories, real life stories of people in serious and chronic illness and those nearing the end of their life. And what she learned through walking together with someone into their darkest places, and what we can do to help. So that's what we worked on. And so there you go. That's that.
Annette, go ahead, introduce yourself, your book, your story.
Okay. My book, let me see if I can see it. Yeah, okay, here we go. So that's Jumping Over Shadows. It's the story of an impossible love that actually worked out. It's still working out. And I would say the healing process here is overcoming the impact of the Holocaust. So I met my husband in post-war Germany.
I'm sorry, your mic, we just lost your mic.
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you
Yes.
now. Yeah,
Okay.
you said you,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
okay, so I met my husband in post-war Germany, and he's the son of Holocaust survivors. And my family had gone through World War II in Czechoslovakia, and had also married into a Jewish family, even though my direct family is not Jewish. So in both families, there was a lot of trauma related to that. And so the two of us coming together, to say the least, was not what our parents had wanted for their kids. So how we made that work and what the soul of the past was.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Oh, wow. Kathleen, go ahead and introduce your book, your story.
Okay, hi. I'm Kathy Pooler, and in 2014, I published Ever Faithful to His Lead, My Journey Away from, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, My Journey Away from Emotional Abuse. In writing this story, I think talking about writing to heal, the themes of hope, resilience, and courage, and finding that we have everything we need inside. We only need to claim and honor it. And I think that is the major theme of my book, that good girl travels rocky road to become a strong woman type of theme. And I lived with shame and guilt for 25 years. I got into and out of 2 emotionally abusive marriages. And I was living a really good life, and I looked back and I went, I don't know how I got from there to here, but I want to write about it and I want to share my journey. So, and I'm also working on a second memoir about being the mother of an alcoholic, an addict, which this memoir took me about 7 years to write.
Mm-hmm.
I started writing before 2000. I started seriously writing in 2009, and I blog every week, Memoir Writer's Journey, about memoir. And I feature memoir writers, so I'd love to have you all as my guests on my blog. We'll have to stay in touch.
Yeah. And everyone's book here will be posted underneath the discussion. So, and mine is broken. Psychon is actually a result of what I was doing in Broken. I wrote it in 2015, and as a means to distract myself, I created Psychon. I have over 30 years of trauma, starting with watching my brother torture and mutilate animals when I was 5 years old. That led on to sibling abuse, where I was beaten and threatened to be killed every day. I had to barricade myself in my room to protect myself. My mother had woven this insane web of lies to protect my brother, which put me in a position where I was left thinking my father hated me and it was a life and death situation. When I was 16, I moved out as a means to protect myself and the animals in the household that I was protecting. And as a means to escape, I ended up moving in with a rapist. And at one point I had to choose between being raped and being beaten. For the record, rape is better. When things got to a substantial low, when the rapes turned into sexual torture, I moved out and landed myself 3 days later with a pedophile who then played psychological games for the next 5 years on me. I walked away with a number of mental disorders, and everything cascaded to 2015 when I was getting ready to launch my first publication, and I was just not in a position to handle any of it. So I created PsyCon as a means to distract myself, and for 2 weeks wrote Broken. And it literally was, when I finished Broken, I walked away. I was finally in a mental hospital. I was finally on therapy, medication, and I began quite literally what turned into the most extraordinary 2 years of my life, where I was confronting the hurt, the problems, and the trauma that I had accumulated for 30 years. So, and that's, thank you. Coming to this particular discussion, for me, writing down everything in Broken was an eye-opening, it was the launching pad for healing. And there is definitely, when I've spoken to especially Charlene and several other people who write memoir, there is something very therapeutic about writing memoirs, whether it be a summation of your end journey or whether it be the start of that journey. There is something very cathartic about it. So we're pretty much here today to review our experiences with writing memoir and how it affected you.
So one of the areas that I'm always playing with is the idea of neuroscience. There was a book put out many years ago by a man named Joseph Gold. And the theory of the book was, I think it was called Read for Your Life. And the idea was that we are wired for story.
That's for sure.
Right? We are wired for story.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
true.
So we're wired for it. So I think that one of the things that is interesting and complex about having been abused or having to work with, as Annette does, the cultural abuses that have taken place, and how do we create love out of that, because I think that's part of all of our journey here. But what has to happen, it seems to me, is to reactivate the memory segments that get blocked out in abuse, the stuff that you can't remember because it's too painful. So that's, to me, the actual definition of PTSD, is when someone can't remember. And then it comes flooding through, and it might come flooding through because you start writing, or you may begin to remember and then start writing, but there's an interaction between that writing and the memory, and that what the goal is, it seems to me, and I'm interested in all of your input on this, and although I'm posing it as a statement, it's actually a question for me, that is it that we have to get the story correct? Is it that we're looking to get that narrative, the narrative arc, and in all of its complexities sort of completed, so that we can rest with the story and go, that is what happened. What does anyone think or feel about that?
When I wrote my memoir, for me, it was I want to sit down and look at everything that happened to me. I was doing a self-exploration, and it was just facts. It was just me sitting down, looking through everything to assess what was wrong with me. The flip side of all that was there was definitely a testament of somebody believed me. Because one of the things that I was confronted my whole life was being called a liar, being told that it wasn't real. My entire family knew I was being beaten by my brother, and no one did anything. No one cared. And I just found out that it's family knowledge. Everyone knew, and no one, it was just accepted. It was fine. So for me, writing it all down was a way of saying this did happen. There was no memory. There was, when I wrote it, it didn't really, it became more vivid, but it didn't awaken any memories, not yet. It was when I began the therapeutic acceptance, getting away from denial, walking through the 5 stages of grief. I hate calling it grief, it's acceptance, the 5 stages of acceptance. By going through that stage, that's when I started to remember. And I'm still remembering. The triggers were always there. We counted up to 44 triggers by the time I started with Broken. And it was easily 2-3 months later that I still had 44 triggers. Those triggers were there whether I remembered or not. My problem was I was triggering and I couldn't remember why I was triggering. I twitched every time I heard a dog bark. I had an issue every time I heard an explosion, any kind of sound. So.
Well, I think with memoir, it's having to face the painful memories is the hard part, but it's the beginning of getting to the other side of it. And I think when you speak in your authentic voice and you really get in touch with those painful memories, then other people can connect with the feelings. And the other thing is, memoir is not just about this happened and that happened, this life events. It's that you can find some meaning in the events of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, I had a question when I first started writing is, how does a young woman from a stable, loving family make so many wise choices about career, so many poor choices about love, that she ends up escaping in the middle of the day with 2 children for fear of physical abuse from her second marriage? Okay, I had to find that answer for myself. And it's through the writing of it that it was revealed to me. But I gotta tell you, facing that was very, very difficult. And I had to do it in manageable doses because I had to admit my vulnerabilities and my flaws.
Yeah.
And I had to be able to share that openly because we are all humans and we need to connect on a human to human level.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Manageable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Little chunks. And it's almost like you can feel the psyche accepting little bits at a time to move forward.
Another thing that really helps, or that I found, because the intensity of the healing that was necessary, and I didn't get this one moment for decades, literally. I've been working with this material all my life, literally. And I didn't get this one moment of like, oh, Char, you actually got in the car of your own free will. Nobody forced you into that car. And that's a shift in the narrative because I'm not the victim. I'm fulfilling a destiny. I'm fulfilling something that I at least in part chose. Now, why I was there and the abuse of my childhood, my brother abused me sexually. My mother was what I call a functioning psychotic. Like you, Angela, my family knew that she was beating us with a leather belt and sometimes with the buckle end and, you know, all kinds of things, but nobody said anything. This was in the dark ages of the 50s. And I think the dark ages went on for a couple of decades and in some places still do, the dark ages of child rearing. So there were innumerable ways in which this had to take place. But when the healing was starting to happen, the point I was going to make about Kathy, but to your point about there's only so much of the darkness that one can take at one time. Mm-hmm. I would actually discipline myself out of my understanding of meditation and how the brain works. I went in 2 hours a week or 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week on a Friday night every time, had a ritual bath afterward to cleanse. And then every other time during the week when the emotion would come up or the painful stuff would come up or the whatever would come up, I put my sword up and say, no, that's for Friday night. I don't do that now. Now I focus on what's positive, what's working. Can I make myself laugh? Can I help my son? I didn't want my son to grow up under a pall of a continual depression. And thank God he did not. So
Yeah.
we really do need to do both, it seems to me, for healing. We need to understand where the damage has been done and where the pain is, but we need to also really focus on those positives, because everybody here today, I can't see Annette, but I know you're there, love. Everybody on this panel today is a healer. It's not only that you've done the healing, but you are actually a healer because you are contributing that healing energy to the great ocean of consciousness.
That's one of the things that really did a lot was the children. My mother was abused. My mother's mother was abused. And I had heard of, and I knew about the generation after generation. I was easily the fourth generation of rape and abuse. So, and the sad thing is the way I was raised was actually an improvement from what my mother had. And I remember there was a moment where I stepped in and said, this stops here. This ends with my generation. My children will not have this. And Charlene, you were talking about your son and how you will not pass this on to him. There is a part of abuse that is absolutely not genetic, inherited. And Kathleen, you mentioned your children running away in the daytime with them. Did you ever get to that point where, again, you wanted to disrupt that cycle and say, my children will not inherit this?
Oh, absolutely. They were the reason I left the first marriage to begin with. Yeah, absolutely. They were always my guiding stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the hardest thing is, like, my daughter is 14 and she's exploring sexual intelligence now. She's not sexually active. She has a very strong opinion. What is decent? What isn't decent? And quote, I want nothing to do with boys. I got better things to do, unquote. So yay. And looking at that, there is definitely she has developed her own. When she comes to me with sex questions, and she does openly come to me with sex questions, the hardest thing is telling her the truth as it is and not as I saw it. That is my hardest challenge with all of this, is making sure my word choices, making sure my reaction. I just found out that she was playing a live role-playing game on the internet with people chatting. That's how the pedophile found me back in 1995. And I this is only a couple days ago, I reacted. I heard that she was on an RPG and I flipped. And I'm like, that is dangerous. I need to calm down. I took her to her stepfather and had him, like, this is the situation, you do this, because I can't. And I stepped back out of it because I was way too biased, way too prejudiced with my own experience and the dangers of internet pedophiles. So
if I may ask Annette, we were mentioning Angela and Kathleen, we were mentioning, and certainly in my case it was true, as my mother had also been deeply abused. But I wonder, Annette, how do you see that in terms of the cultural abuses that you worked with to heal both sides of that family that you have now? That's such a great example of that healing.
So I think that what you all are saying, just in general terms of what memory helps with is, and that's what my book is, figuring out what influences you. Okay, so I think Julia Cameron talks about the mere fact, and that's why she propagates morning pages among other things. If you write about something bad, and I think we all agree on this, if you write about something bad, your load becomes lighter.
yeah.
And and it's just for yourself. And if you write about something good, the joy becomes greater, which I think is one of the magical things about the world we live in. So that's one thing. But in my case, I did not suffer any abuse. And I, commend all of you highly for even, facing all of that. But I think that that's what we kind of share, that if you suffered abuse yourself, or if you inherited, as in my case, I was being held accountable for things, or, my life was being made hard, very hard. We had to keep our relationships secret because of the memories that we had inherited, and I could not discount it at all. From my in-laws, my husband marrying a non-Jew and someone of German descent was the absolute nightmare. That was the worst thing that could happen to the family after they survived the Holocaust. So So, you cannot discount that. Those were their experiences. So, to me, and with my own family background, what memoir did for me is really helped sort out all the things that really happened and that influenced our lives.
That is, I'm like really, my aunt lives in Israel. She married an Israeli born and raised in Tel Aviv.
Mhm.
So we're very familiar with the situation. I met his mother and father, and there is nothing more bone chilling than seeing the numbers etched on their arms from the concentration camps. So yeah, your book has my attention. Like your story absolutely has my attention. I remember finding, and this was I hate to call it an heirloom because it's pretty horrible, but it's really, it's their part of their legacy. I was going through their books one day in their library, and one of the books I found was a family tree of the Tel Aviv family. I'm sorry, of the Ben Yochel family, and their whole purpose was to show you prior and after World War II in the concentration camps, and how many, it was like a long line of 100 people per family, 2 survivors, his mother and his father. And it was impactful. It was very, so you bring up a topic that I never even thought was an issue.
Right.
And it's really, I'm very eager to see what that looks like at the other end of things.
Thank you. Incidentally, my husband just left for Israel, so
Yeah.
yeah, my son is serving in the army there, and
Yeah.
uncle who's celebrating his 90th birthday, so that's why I just visited here.
Yeah, my youngest cousin just got into the army over there. Yeah, she's the fifth, and in Israel, everyone has to serve when they hit 18. It doesn't matter, male, female, everyone. And I think it's 3 years they have to do service. So Mia is the youngest, and she just joined the army. So
This is to me the cultural schism that demonstrates the epigenetic of the personal abuse. I think we're all seeing it. I'm just putting it into language. The personal abuses that each of us are talking about are culturally captured by what happened to the German people, the Jewish people, the intelligentsia, the gypsies, the ones who were different, the artists, all of those people under Hitler's regime. And that there is no separation, it seems to be, between one and the other. We are doing what the cultural epigenetic demands, as you're saying, Angela, comes out. Now, Kathleen, did you find any historic place for your journey in what you did? And then Richard, you also had that cultural thing. I'm sorry, I'm jumping. Suddenly.
Well, the cultural norms of my time, where, the Cinderella complex. Someday my prince will come.
Yeah.
And I'll be all better, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and, that's all I knew. And I was just at the crux of the women's revolution and women's rights and everything. So, yeah, there were a lot of cultural factors. I was kind of caught in between there, but they did influence a lot my decisions and the struggles that I had.
Yeah, waking up out of that, right? No more Cinderella, no more Sleeping Beauty, no more.
Right.
I think there's actually a book called Kiss Sleeping Beauty Goodbye.
Huh.
From the 1960s. Yeah, I think I might even have an old copy here, but it was when we were all sort of going, wait a minute, what have we been taught?
Right.
About what being a woman is, you got to be a nice person. And
I love the rendition of Cinderella on Broadway. I saw that because it was it's like, I'm going to be the person I'm going to be. And if, it's going to have to find me.
Yeah, they really, we're going
really
back
did.
to the original Disneys and watching them with my children. And I'll tell you, it's a trip to see the evolution of Disney.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I think Frozen was a real shift in the cultural mindset, in that true love was now being examined between the girls, the sisters, rather than the prince is going to be the major one. But Richard, I wanted to ask you about your take about culture and how that plays out in terms of your struggle and your journey. the cultural influence that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's part of what made you become a soldier in the first place, or how you enlist, or
Well, for me, why I became a soldier to begin with was there was two reasons why. Excuse me, I apologize. I myself grew up it very vaguely talks about this in the book, but I was also, abused and stuff as a child, and my parents had a really messy divorce. I was the oldest of two, so I took on the role of everything, and it was at that pinnacle of my age of where, especially when my dad left and my stepdad came into the picture, I was 13 years old. So I was like, no, wait a minute here. I'm the man of the house.
Yeah.
And it was my job to be protector at that point. So I didn't really get that, the sensation of childhood. I lost that. I actually, I had to grow up. I had to take care of my sister. I had to take care of my mom. And I had to take care of myself. So I really didn't get to be a kid. When I got into college, I had a lot of negative feelings around me from family about going to college. I didn't have a lot of support growing up, very, very little. In fact, in my hometown where I grew up, there was one woman who believed that I would even graduate high school. And it wasn't even my mom.
Yeah.
It was our next door neighbor. She was the only one. They literally had a bet, a $500 bet, that I would never graduate high school.
Oh, no.
Because I was always, I'm very hyperactive. I'm dyslexic. I've had, learning disabilities all of my life. And my biggest problem is anger. Because at that time, I didn't know how to channel the frustrations with everything that I was dealing with. So I do it with anger, and because of that, I ended up being sent home from school quite a bit. I ended up staying, there was a couple of times where I spent weeks, if not months, at home and doing homeschooling because I wasn't allowed to go to school, or I was kicked off the bus, so I had to find rides to school. Now, mind you, with my school, the high school that I went to, from 7th grade to senior, was 28 miles from my house. So trying to find a ride there, it wasn't like I could just walk to school. It definitely wasn't easy. So when I got into college, I didn't have a lot of support. I did it all on my own. My mom supported me the best she could. By all means, I don't blame her by any means. She did what she could. She supported me the best she could. And I had gotten some, financial aid and everything, and that's how I got into school. But it was about halfway through my first semester when I realized that I was going to have no support, and I had no way of paying this back. So I actually went to join the military in the beginning of my second semester, specifically because of the Montgomery GI Bill and college money. I was going to get some college money. And my goal was to never join the United States Army. My original goal was to go to the United States Air Force because I had an infatuation with Top Gun. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly an F-16 and F-14. That's what my real true goal was. So when I went to the recruiting station, I went all on my own completely and said, I'm doing this. I'm getting out of here. And the other was because of all this stuff, because of all the negativity around me, I had to get away. My family had started, getting into drugs. My grandfather had died in October of '98, and that's where drug use and across my whole family started getting really bad. My mom, my stepdad, my uncles, their girlfriends or wives, my sister, they just all kind of took this big, huge plunge down the hill. And it got really bad, and I just couldn't be around it. I didn't want to be around it at the time. So I had to get the heck out of here. And I said, well, the only way I can do this is joining the military. So I went to the recruiting station by myself, joined the military. I went to join the Air Force And it was early in the morning, so the recruiter wasn't there yet. The Army recruiter came in and said, "Can I help you?" And I told him what I was there for. And he said, "Well, let me show you what we can offer you, and you can make a decision." Well, he showed me this neat little video of a guy riding a four-wheeler with a machine gun attached to it. And at the young, ripe age of 18, I was, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I signed a dotted line right then and there, and within 7 days, I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky, in my OSIT training to be a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout. That's why I joined. I joined to get away from everything that I'd been through, in my, in previous, and then I never wanted to come home. When I was over, I went originally, right as soon as I was out of basic, I went to Germany in '99. And that was my duty station right up until I came home in 2002. I stayed in Germany, except for when I was in combat. When I come back from combat, I would go to my duty station in Friedberg. And by all means, even with the trauma that I sustained and physically and mentally in combat in Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Kosovo, I don't regret Germany one single bit. I don't regret joining because I did and saw things. I got to see the world, and I got to be a part of something much bigger than I ever thought of being. And being able to see and do the things over there, I mean, just to walk down the streets in Germany where they're cobblestone roads, that's amazing. That is just amazing. And the fact that I can sit here, my little girl, my daughter now, 9 years old, asks me about this stuff because they talk about geography or this, that, the other thing in school, and she comes home and talking about Germany, and she asks these questions, and I can show her pictures of, well, check out this. This is what a rescue squad looks like over there. This is what the stores look like over there. This is what the roads look like over there, because it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. But, and it's the dealing of the trauma in today's world with, all the stuff that's going on. And I've seen a huge cultural change with this. And one of my biggest, I have issues with is this new thing. And I hate to get into politics but I have to, is this new thing where Miss Hillary Clinton lost the election and people are being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because she didn't win. Excuse me, I went through a living hell, and that is nothing compared to what I went through to somebody just losing an election. And it really drives me nuts to see that on mass media, to see that online, to see that on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, that they have literally started diagnosing these people that were so affected by her losing the election with post-traumatic stress disorder. That isn't traumatic. I'm sorry. It just isn't to me.
I'm in Canada here, but I'd love to hear what all the rest of you Americans say about that.
When I was diagnosed with PTSD, the one comment I got back from everybody was, "You've never been in war." I have all the respect for you, Richard. That being said, it is bullcrap that only people who've been through war and combat walk away with PTSD.
Oh, no, I don't.
And I know what you're saying. I know exactly. And I don't take it that at all. They devalue the trauma you've been through.
Right.
That's what it is.
That's right.
Absolutely.
With this Clinton and then it's traumatizing. I have PTSD now. You feel devalued. Like your experience is completely thrown out the window. And I experienced that same feeling when people said, "Well, how dare you have that diagnosis? You've never been in combat. You haven't earned it." To hell I have. And it is a devaluing. I have not heard of that particular situation, so I'll be doing some Google work when we're done here. But and this goes true of any diagnosis that's thrown around. There is, and I think this is where our culture grossly understands what PTSD is. And in fact, when I was diagnosed with it, I had no clue. I said the same thing. I'm like, how can I have PTSD? I wasn't in combat. And when they went over that it's trauma, and then there was well, what trauma? I haven't been traumatized. And then it was, there was a lot of redefining what trauma is. And honestly, yeah, there's, the politics is a whole nother topic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree, but I just, and I don't, like I said,
Yeah.
I know there's, people out there that have been through serious traumas.
Yeah.
Even with Kathleen, the things she went through in her life. I've read her book, and I've been in a writer's group with her, so I got to see the formation of this book come alive, and hearing some of the stories she told me about, there are symptoms there of PTSD.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, and I don't hold it, if you've been through something trauma in life, and as a firefighter and EMT, I'm learning more and more about the disability itself. And in fact, I've actually learned on some new terms, which I'm going to address in the new book. The next memoir is called PTG, post-traumatic growth, where they take the
That's
disability
beautiful.
and the disorder out of it, and where you can grow from the trauma you've had. It's a huge, huge thing, and I believe it was a German doctor who actually discovered this. I don't have all of the information.
You have to. You
in
don't
front
have
of
to.
me.
You have to. It's
Right.
not your choice.
You've got to grow out of whatever trauma. I'll tell you, the first trauma that all of us have ever experienced was birth. Birth is traumatic. It doesn't matter how you're born. For most people, birth is a traumatic experience. So trauma is arguably part of our gift. Now, I don't, for any reason, want anybody to ever be tied to a chair and tortured the way I was. I don't want anyone being beaten by their mother who's screaming at them verbal abuse. No! But that's been our history. But our genius as a group is we can know how to fix it. We now know neuroplasticity is true. We now know that the brain will change. We now know all these amazing things that when I was coming through from 16 and then into 20s and my 30s, and it wasn't, I didn't know any of that. But now we have all this amazing stuff that's telling us this is how you can grow. And everybody on this panel contributed to that. We all contributed because we all refused to give up. I think that's one of the common bonds we have. We not only are willing to write about our struggle, and as Kathleen, you said in the beginning, to make ourselves vulnerable to the shame, to the feeling of, I did something so bad, I got into a car that these two men could do this stuff to me, right? What was wrong with my brain? And yet still come through and become the human beings that we are. There's something in what I'm saying that is about the healing. It's about what we're all doing together to create the energy that becomes what this guy that you're talking about, Richard, can do. He can talk about it because there's enough of us, like the 100th monkey. There's enough of us who've come through, who are working at it. This is what excites me. I don't know if that's very bizarre.
That is
I agree.
one of the biggest things with talking about it. And can I always talk about everything that I did go through, overseas, or even some of the things that I went through as a child? No, I couldn't. As I was writing this memoir, I put something, in the book, a traumatic event that happened to me for a 3-year period, and was allowed to happen, but I took it out because I couldn't release that information. I realized that I wasn't ready because I'm not ready to face that. I still have a lot of anger because of it, and I always will. I never will forgive for that. I just can't.
Oh, sweetheart, I'm jumping right in here one more time with my big fat mouth, and I'm going to tell you something right now. Now, you listen to me. There is no forgiveness about the other person. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter if you forgive them at all. It has nothing to do with them. Forgiveness is, you don't matter to me. You don't matter to me in the point that I've healed enough that whatever happened that you thought was powerful or you thought you were, it's got nothing. It's nothing. It is nothing. I don't believe that I forgive those two men or my mother. I love my mother. Do I forgive her? I don't know. I don't even care. I don't even care. Because my energy is put into being healthy and being the person that I am and living my life so much so that it's a story. It's something that happened. But
this is something I'm very curious about, Kathleen. When you were writing your memoir, I didn't write it to publish it. I wrote mine as an absolute diary journal. I wrote it in the only way I knew how, so mine actually reads like a fiction novel. But when I walked away from mine, I looked back at it and went, wow, maybe I should publish this. So I handed it to a girlfriend of mine who had severe trauma. She was raped from the time she was 5 years old by her stepfather right up until she was about 15 years old. And she read it and told me, this is powerful. This will affect people. You must publish this. And until she had said that to me, I had not considered publishing it. And there was a process with that decision. Do I release this to the public? I was worried about family members. I was worried about the perception, how people were going to perceive it, if I was going to be ridiculed, ostracized. Ironically, the one person who I was certain was going to stand behind me was the first person and the only person to shun me, and he hasn't spoken to me since. Everybody else looked at that and went, yeah, that's what happened, which blew me away. So I am curious, Kathleen. Oh yeah, it disgusted me. I'm like, you knew? That's how I found out that everybody knew. And my sister read it and she calls me up and goes, do you still believe this? And I'm like, well, yeah, no one's told me otherwise. So Kathleen, I do have to ask, when you wrote your memoir, was there any reservation about how your ex-husbands would perceive you?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Oh my gosh. Oh yes. Very, very, very much so. I sought the help of an attorney because I was so very concerned. And I changed his name. I changed some of the identifying characteristics. But I knew in my heart it was my truth. And the people that knew him and knew us knew these things anyway.
Yeah.
But I struggled a great deal. And what the irony of it is that 6 weeks after I published it, he died of cirrhosis. And I was at his deathbed with my children. And I stood in my truth.
How do you feel? Should I apologize? I'm sorry. Is this a good thing? I don't know the proper reaction to this.
Did you forgive him, Kathleen?
Yes, I forgave him years ago.
Okay.
But it was a gradual letting go. So that and the one thing I discovered in writing this book was that, and it's something when we were talking, I was thinking, when we write these stories, from a distance, we have an opportunity to reframe our stories that we tell ourselves. Okay, so I held on to anger. He abandoned my children. He abused me emotionally and that type of thing.
When you wrote your memoir, Richard, what emotion did you have?
That's tough.
Okay.
I'm sorry, actually, it's kind of hard.
Yeah, it is hard. Take your time.
The emotions.
I have to go.
I
have to go.
That's okay. Thank you. I can edit this out, so you're absolutely okay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sorry we didn't hear from you, Irene.
Sorry,
Richard.
No, that's okay. To answer the question, the emotions I felt have been, they've been huge. I felt everything. And the stressors have come back a little bit. And I got to tell you, the main reason I've written the book was because I'm dealing with anxiety and depression because I lost my job 4 weeks ago. And we don't have anything to pay the bills with. So I've been struggling. And when struggle gets like that for me, I have to find something to do. I have to do something. I have to be doing something with my brain, because if I'm not, that's when I get the worst. So that is why I sat down and, I wrote and I put the book together and said, what kind of message can I put out there, and quickly, because I wanted to get a message out. And honestly, the stressors come back. I haven't had any nightmares in a long, long time. So I appreciate that I don't have, there's something I've been able to do, whether I've blocked them out, whether I've healed enough to know that it doesn't bother me. Now, and that's not, 100% true, because if I watch a military movie, or, watch like the new ones, they're rough to watch because the new ones actually depict actual events.
Yeah.
Black Hawk Down, Lone Survivor, the one about Chris Kyle, American Sniper. It's tough for me to watch them. I can watch them, but it is very tough for me to watch them because I relate. The American Sniper, I knew that man.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tough, when I see stuff like that.
Rich.
But with the feelings, I realized that, and I say this in the book, of how to take these feelings and turn them into a positive thing. And this is what the next one's going to be about with the post-traumatic growth, and that's exactly what the PTG is you taking the depression, taking the anxiety, taking the feelings, the being alone, the hatred, the anger, the fear, taking all of that and using it in a positive way to change yourself. And if I can do that for myself, why can't I do it for others?
Sure. It's a great.
So,
I have a question also for Annette, just for a moment here, Rich. I'm gonna jump in. Annette, what is the role of forgiveness in how you struggled with the two lineages? How did you experience the need for that, or letting go, or?
No, because there's nothing to forgive. None of us involved in our current lives have any guilt or any, none of us were perpetrators, so to speak. None of my family were Nazis. On the contrary, they were social democrats, and they sort of were on the wrong side of the fence, even without their Jewish connection. So, no, I just think that for my in-laws, that mattered very much. It's very much where I came from, and when they finally met me, they met me as their future daughter-in-law, and they were like, the minute we left the house, they must have gotten on the phone to Aunt Rachel, who's a character in the book later on. She survived Auschwitz. She's the only family member who survived Auschwitz. My father-in-law survived in a different way. And the thing they talked about was the one thing my husband and I just hadn't told them, which was like the most crucial thing to them, is whether my family were Nazis.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and much, I don't know when they asked my husband about my actual lineage, but, and I know for my husband, like when he met me, like he paid attention to where I came from and who my parents were right from the bat.
Wow.
Right.
So.
See, because I keep translating in my head, and tell me how this works for anybody or doesn't. I keep translating, what if we admitted that someone in our family is a pedophile? Somebody in our family is a Nazi. Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, there's some parallel going on there. Because the other side of the healing is we've got families around us that are housing people who are abusing children and abusing people and doing all that. And that's still going on.
There's a lot of denial. There's a lot of, one of the huge things, and I'm not going to embellish on the Trump issue. That being said, and to avoid that particular topic, there's a few members of my family who are downright racist. It's disgusting. I have zero tolerance for racism. The N-word is disgusting. And I was raised, my grandfather's from that old generation where it's kind of expected. And one of his children inherited that prejudice. And here's the thing, he doesn't know, and he doesn't think he's racist. But the things he is saying.
Right.
And I just watched 12 Angry Men, one of my favorite movies. And there's one character where the things he says are just disgusting.
Mhm.
Very, very racist. And he goes on this massive pedestal. He just has this massive soapbox, vile racial stuff that he says, to the point where everyone in the room tells him to sit down, shut your filthy mouth. It is
Mhm.
that bad. That is about as bad as my relative is. And he will deny it. He truly does not think he's racist.
So are you making the point then, Angela, that someone who's a pedophile doesn't know they're doing anything?
Oh, no, the pedophile that had me, no. Oh,
Or
no,
the
he was,
Nazis,
no.
Because the Nazis also believed they were doing something right. And that, would you
The
say?
word pedophile absolutely did not apply to him, because I asked him about it. I was 16, he was 45, and he had a 12-year-old. And I asked him, so you're a pedophile? And his response was, oh, no, I like young, yep.
Bye, Kathleen.
Bye.
Bye, thank you. He liked young ladies just like I liked older men. And looking back with a therapist sitting down with me explaining why I was pursuing an older gentleman, it's not the same thing. There's definitely a psychology there. There was
Power balance, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Total power.
And he would not categorize himself. First of all, he was an attorney.
Right.
So he knew the laws. He was absolutely at an advantage where he knew where those boundaries were. He totally redefined the role he was in to justify that what he was doing was fine.
Yep. Now, the interesting thing, I think, in what you're saying is, again, it takes me back to what Annette may have experienced with the idea of the Nazis, who also believed that they were doing something for a completely reasonable purpose.
And I doubt they would use the N-word on them. I doubt if you were to ask them, they would even, oh, I'm not a Nazi. That's not me. What I did was just put a few people on a train and ship them off to a concentration camp, but I'm not a Nazi.
Well, this is what I'm wondering with Annette, because you've got a closer relationship to that lineage than I do. Do you think that is kind of part of the focus of what happened to the Nazis, if they believed they had a higher cause or a higher calling going on, so they could ignore the human suffering that they were?
Yeah, I think that they, I mean, it's sad to say, but a vast majority of Germans believed in the cause. And a lot of people, turned away, didn't do anything, let things happen, didn't question what happened. So there's a lot of, and that's still the case in Germany, and that's one of the things I do not like about the country at all, is that it's very respectful of authority. It's a country, unlike the U.S., which is very, into individualism, people making their own decisions. In Germany, to this day, children can only play outside at certain times.
No.
Otherwise, you got to be quiet.
Really?
Yeah. And like in just little things, like in my father-in-law lived in an apartment building, and like you cannot leave your shoes in the hallway outside, like because that's disorderly. So there are these sort of, there are these cultural norms, there are these sort of rules, and everybody obeys the rules. And if you don't know the rules, or you don't abide by them, then your neighbors will tell you. It's not even, like an authority figure. So it's that kind of culture that, always rubbed me the wrong way, and that must be my American heritage. And plus my family, as my husband always points out, was not really German. They came from Czechoslovakia, so that was more the Austro-Hungarian culture, which is quite different.
Bohemian in many ways that the Germans could never be.
Right.
Romantic, I think, is another word that might apply.
Yeah, just, a little more bohemian, a little more.
Yeah.
Disorderly. I mean, my brother lives in Austria, and and he lived on the top floor of like a 5-story building for many years, and it was everybody had their shoes out and their furniture and their plants, and I'm like, this stairway just would never exist.
In Germany. Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, that's just a little, and that's just a cultural thing. So
Yeah.
I always found that totally oppressive. And I think that mentality facilitated a lot of that.
It's strikingly frightening to me what you said very quickly in one sentence, that in your understanding, many German people still believe that in the cause.
Yes, they do.
That's
Richard, you
dangerous.
have experience with that. What makes you say that, Richard?
Because I lived in Germany in Friedberg for so long, I actually was able to, befriend German nationals. That's what we refer to them on base. And meeting some of the old timers. There was a girl there that was from there that I dated for a little while. Her father was, still 100%. And this is 1999, 2000, and 2001, all for the cause. And at first was really against her and I dating because I was an American. It wasn't until conversation, him and I having conversation, is where he kind of took a liking to me, because I was fascinated by the history of it and what he believed, and and how he saw things. Because like you said, they do believe in that. The same reason why I myself, as an American soldier, believed that I was in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting for freedom, when in reality I wasn't. I was fighting for God, guns, oil, and drugs.
Guns, oil, and drugs. God, I love that. Richard, that's brilliant. I've never heard that before.
That's what we were there for.
You bet it was. That's what Vietnam was about, too.
And, and it's, why did we go to Afghanistan? It had nothing to do with Osama bin Laden. Why did it take us 14 to 15 years to kill the guy? Because we weren't there for that. We were there for the opiates, the poppy fields, and the heroin fields, because we need those drugs for pharmaceuticals over here to make pain medication.
We also need those drugs to keep part of the population anesthetized, the same way that we allow pornography, because it anesthetizes the population, which might otherwise start organizing things differently, or saying, whatever would come out of that, it would be a much more active situation. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on in that. Yeah, Afghanistan, and the other thing, of course, is that the US and Canada, number one, number two exporters of weapons. So we need a war to keep business going. And the nasty part about that, Richard? I support the war cause. Why? Because I buy all the stuff that my culture allows. So everything I do, every penny I'm putting out there, every consumer object that I'm buying is contributing in some way or another. Amazon, Walmart, all these places are deeply encased in the stock market. And that is actually a measure of the arms race, of how many.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I've actually started buying stocks and reading about pharmaceuticals and stuff, and the pharmacy companies, and how sick it is.
Yeah.
And to know that the reason we see the anti-drug things to not legalize marijuana is because pharmaceuticals, and Philip Morris, the company that owns Marlboro, and other cigarette companies as well, they're funneling the money to the anti-drug corporations, or not necessarily corporations, but the causes, such as, Moms Against Drugs, or, those kind of little organizations and stuff. Their money, their funding comes from the pharmacies and these cigarette companies to make those signs to say, oh no, drugs are bad, okay?
It's like Clockwork Orange or something. It's like living in the Monty Python.
Yeah.
World. That's just like
Okay.
sense of this world. It's just like this crazy thing that's going on out there. But I think it's important to grapple with the paradoxes and the ironies, and the fact that it isn't a linear line, but it's kind of this chaos that's happening.
Richard, I have to ask, you said that you don't have nightmares anymore. What did you do to get rid of them?
It's I honestly, honestly, I don't know how I did it completely. Honestly, like I said, I used for the coffee, the cigarettes for so many years, and music. When I have a real bad day, I'll come in here, and and everybody speaks of it, against it, because a lot of people do have an issue with addiction, and a lot of people do have an issue with drinking, especially when it relates to the PTSD. Um, have I had my fair share of going down the wrong roads with that? Absolutely. When I traveled the rodeo circuit, um, I was drinking constantly, like every day of the week. When my wife now had broke up with me, I spent one whole summer traveling the rodeo circuit. I said, you know what? She's gonna be gone. I'll go back to the rodeo, and I did. And I rode pro for that whole year, and I drank so much, my friends literally thought I was going to die because I was drinking so heavily. I don't have that problem though. I just, there's something in my head that, you know what, I don't need to drink like that anymore. But I can come out here when I'm having a bad day, sit in my studio. I can do Facebook Live through my computer, have a grand old time all by my little lonesome, and sit here and do karaoke through my studio, which is, it's completely hilarious. And some people get kicks out of it. And you know what? If they get kicks out of it, I don't really care because I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that I use to, just, get rid of a bad day. And, have I had an issue with alcohol in the past? Yes, I've done my fair share of, let's drink as much as I possibly can drink. But it's, for me, I guess, mind over matter. It's what I tell myself. And the other, tell myself to do. Look, you gotta, when I got married, I had my daughter. We already had my daughter, and that really changed my way of life.
Yeah.
Huge, because I love that little girl, and there is no way that I would ever want her to experience the things I experienced growing up, and and the divorce, and the hatred and the abuse, and the issues in school and this and that. Now we're seeing a little issue in school. I'm seeing that she's got the same learning disabilities that I have. So she's in assisted learning. And then this stupid Common Core thing they rolled out makes it even worse.
Yeah. My son is autistic, and you were explaining your own learning disabilities, your own obstacles. My son is the exact same way. And the core curriculum is not friendly with him.
I bet not.
Yeah. He was almost kicked off the bus. Like you were like quoting my son's history to me, and I'm like, yeah, I've been there.
And it's tough, but to get rid of the nightmares, I really, I spent a lot of time, rethinking everything and going through everything that I've experienced. And I wasn't able to write this book until now. When you guys were discussing earlier about when you come up to writing the book, facing the challenges that you faced writing the book, I have faced all these challenges before. I've done this. So writing the book for me now is how I dealt with it, how I was able to go through those, meeting those challenges. And to be honest, I guess the only answer I have for that is I don't focus on the bad. I focus on the good. And I look at being overseas, and yeah, I lost a lot of my closest friends, some guys that I went through basic training with all the way straight on through into combat. So we became brothers because we were together every single day. We lived in the same barracks from the time I swore, raised my right hand and swore in, right up to their death.
Yeah.
So, but I have the positive note of that is because I was able to spend that much time with them, I got the good times too. I got to go out on the town, and we got to go down for Turkish gyro down on the street in Freiburg, Germany, right after we left the bar at 3 a.m. and sing cadence, drunk, smash drunk on 40% wheat beer because they wouldn't let us drive because we were so hammered. So we all, sing cadence on the way back. Them are the things I look at. And even now, the things that when I, run into the things I'm dealing with, some days the depression is low. Some days I feel like hell. The pain is excruciating. The pain I get with my anxiety and the stress, with my back, some days I can't even get out of bed. If it wasn't for my God-saving grace wife in there massage my back this morning, I wouldn't have been out here on this call. Because I was in pain when I woke up this morning because of the stress. I was up most of the night. I got to get this website done. I need this website so that it's ready for PsyCon.
One of the things that, excuse me, I'm sorry. One of the things that my therapist is huge with getting me to understand is that stress is a trigger. Taking those 44 triggers and condensing them down to, they are the result of, it's stress. And it helps a lot to it's bad, but relabeling everything. And when you relabel, and there's a huge part of healing that comes from relabeling, and I think that's where writing the memoir really comes in and helps, is it starts the process of labeling. And it's weird because labeling in so many ways is bad and unhealthy, but at the same time, there is something very therapeutic about it, being able to identify and redefine. And that's one of the things that I'm working on right now through the healing is, let's go through your dictionary and literally redefine each and single thing that's happened to you. And one of those is stress is a trigger. And sure enough, with PsyCon and building that up, my stress is going up and the nightmares are back full force. And, last 2 days I've been triggered and I've been twitching. And it's interesting to see the relationship between stress and the response in the trauma.
Focus more on the positive things.
Generally,
what PsyCon has done for you, and focus on those things. And the more you focus on those things, the more you think about, and not necessarily think about, oh my God, look at how much stuff I got to do. Look at what you've already overcome. Look at the challenges you faced. And like you said in the beginning of this panel, of how bad the website crashed, you lost everything. And look at where it's come now. And I got to say, from being an author standpoint and being a person, I build my own websites. All of my websites that you will visit or see, my radio station, everything. I built every inch of it because I knew what I wanted. Somebody else wouldn't be able to give me that. Number one. Number two, I can't afford it. So that's, it's easier for me to, find a way to get that domain for the first year at $1.99 or whatever to get me through the first year, and I'll find a way to pay for it next year, but then build it myself, because one, I know what I want, I know what I'm looking at. May not always be what everybody else wants or what everybody else would envision. But once they see what I envision, then they'll understand. It goes to with my freelance stuff that I'm working on building. Everybody's like, why did you name it F5 Editing and Design and put a tornado in there? Because I'm so fast, I come in and I fix it for you and I'm out. It's like I'm a tornado because I can do it so quickly. Yesterday, came to a pinnacle of I have a blog solely for my pseudonym, Shotgun Bo Rivers, my Western genre. I can't put the two of them together and try to put the memoir stuff there and still be in the realm of the Western genre. It's really tough. So I knew I needed that new website. I was able to get the website, install it, make it work, put the stuff on there, and have it up and running. I did it in a matter of about 3 hours because I had class last night from 6 to 10. I was an EMT class.
Excuse me, Richard. I'd like to ask Annette a question here again, and I'm going to take it way on another course. Annette, I'm really curious about, we've talked a lot today about children and the effect of parents who've been abused or suffered not wanting to pass that down to their children. Do you think there's been any effect, and I would imagine it would be a positive effect on your children, that you have been so expressive about the conundrum of bringing these two lineages together?
Yes, in fact, I just saw my son, who's an IDF soldier, last week, and we talked about. So I'm afraid my kids have inherited. Well, I know my kids have inherited my own cultural displacement, and that goes back to my family's trauma of being expelled from their homeland in Czechoslovakia. And subsequently, Americans tend to be sort of homeless anyway. At least my mom's family was, because my grandfather served in the Navy, and they just lived all over the place. So my mom never really felt that she came from a place, which is probably what enabled her to marry a German and move overseas. And she's been there ever since. She's very happy there. But what I mean is that our whole family has that sort of cultural displacement. So my kids, my son is a tall, lanky guy, and he serves as an Israeli soldier. And if anything, people think he's Russian because, if you're tall and kind of light-skinned, then that's what you are in Israel. But they sort of grew up with this, and my daughter kind of relishes it. So I think in that sense, I've passed that on. If anything, they are half American, half German Jews. And German Jews really don't exist anymore because everybody left. So there's nobody like them who speaks fluent German but is 100% Jewish and but grew up in America.
Right.
It's weird. It's just,
right.
It doesn't fit a mold.
Right.
And, neither my husband doesn't fit a mold because he's Jewish and he grew up in post-war Germany. Very few people did. So when people meet us, when they meet him, and they hear his accent, and they're like, "Where are you from?" And they never guess Germany because it just doesn't occur to people. They know he's Jewish.
Right.
They pick up on it, right? But a Jew is just not from Germany. So,
right.
That is astounding. He stayed in Germany after the war.
Yeah.
So, my husband's born in 1960, so post-war child, right? But what happened is that my father-in-law, he actually fought in the Red Army. That's how he survived. He's the only one, except for his cousin who survived Auschwitz, who survived from the entire. And he ended up, he was in the force that liberated Berlin, my father-in-law. And he was happy as a Russian soldier until Stalin started killing Jewish doctors in 1948. And then he was like, well, I got to get out of here. And in the meantime, he had connected with his cousin who had survived Auschwitz, and she was in a displaced person camp in West Germany. That's where sort of all the survivors ended up in displaced person camps, and then they got visas to move on to other countries. He moved on to the US. And he was about to board, so the family story goes, he was about to board a boat in Hamburg to also ship off to the US. And they pulled him off, and they told him, you don't know why.
We need you to repeat what you just said after they pulled him off the ship, because we didn't pick it up. Your microphone is coming in and out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So engaging. I want to hear.
Okay, so he was denied a visa to the United States, and he ended up staying in Germany. We don't know why he was denied a visa. We think that the authorities, the U.S. was, the Western allies were in charge in Germany at the time. We think they figured out that he had been a Soviet soldier, and the Cold War was already starting up. So we think, but we don't know. He could have gone to Israel, which is what a lot of people did, but Israel, that meant going to war.
Mm-hmm.
And his experience would have been very valuable there, obviously. And a lot of, the whole IDF was built of people who had fought, a lot of them, especially the Air Force. But he was tired of war.
Yeah.
He didn't want to fight anymore.
Mhm.
So he started a little business in post-war Germany, and which was actually quite smart thing business-wise to do because that country was devastated. Everybody was starting at ground zero. And if you were a certified what they called anti-fascist, so if you could prove that you had not been a Nazi, which of course as a Jew you were able to do things that other people weren't, which was also something that ended up helping my family because they were able to get jobs as teachers after they ended up in the American occupied zone.
Mhm.
So anyway, so my in-laws, my father-in-law stayed in Germany and built a little business. And my mother-in-law survived in France. She was a hidden child. And her father had a bed feather business in Paris. And her father survived, her mother didn't. Her mother died in Auschwitz. And one day she went on a business trip with her dad to Germany and she met my father-in-law.
Oh,
They had plans to, they always sat on their suitcases, which is a very Jewish thing to say, to do. You know, they were always, especially living in Germany, they always felt guilty about it. They always, you know, like they raised their sons not to be Germans. They don't have German passports. My husband actually has a passport. So they were all uneasy. They were uneasy about the choice they made
Mhm.
to live in the land of the murderers. But that's what they did. So my husband, you know, grew up as a Jew in post-war Germany, and the community in Munich, you know, Munich still is a city of about 1.3 million people, and there were about 5,000 Jews at the time. And you know, it's like a little, like growing up in a village. You know, everybody knew everybody. There were 2 synagogues, and but it's just an odd thing, you know. It's an odd thing to be from there, to, you know, to speak German fluently without any Yiddish accent or Russian accent. So, and to circle back to your question, that that's what our kids inherited. You know, they inherited that cultural oddity of their parents, and I think that I hope that we succeeded in, and I know with my 2 older kids, I think we definitely did. My younger son is probably the most American of our kids. But he loves soccer, so in that. But you know, but that's also, you know, in the U.S. I think it's easier because the U.S., like Israel, it's a country of immigrants, so people are from different places.
It's interesting, Charlene, you said, I can't remember if you had said it or if Annette had, but there is a lack of home and identity here in the States. I mean, I'm Irish. I just counted everything from the northern region: German, Irish, English, and Scandinavia. That's where my heritage is. But I don't feel identified with that. I feel disconnected from that. And with it, I feel like there's a massive loss of identity. And it really, every now and then I'll find something and I think, oh, well, this is definitely something from my heritage. And that's just, I don't have a heritage. And I see this a lot around people who are friends, family growing up. We really lack identity and heritage. When I went to New York City and stopped in to see Svika's family, they had just gotten, I'm going to say they just got off the boat and they were living in New York. We went in to say hello to them, and their culture, they offer you something to drink. You walk in the door and they offer you something to drink and you take it. You do not say no. It's highly offensive. So we accepted it. We all stood around with drinks.
Yeah.
And we weren't thirsty, but we were standing there with drinks. And it was they had an identity. They had a culture. They belonged somewhere. And in America, as an American growing up without any connection whatsoever to my heritage or culture, because America is it's gone. We have no food. We have no defining identity whatsoever. And I'm huge with watching cultural shows. I love watching English cooking, French cooking, and these different cultures. And I see them with their food and their tradition and holidays. And we just don't have that. We have this hodgepodge of, just whatever.
I don't know. Canadian, and I have to tell you, we got a really clear sense about what y'all are doing down there. We just see you guys, and we go,
We
yeah.
love spending money.
What's
What
that?
are you doing?
I said a whole lot of spending money come holidays.
Yeah, that's
Well,
it. That's
there's
it.
a lot
Commercialized.
of stuff that, I mean, separating out consumerism and the ways in which all of the G8 countries are joined as a culture of consumerism, but separating that out, there is something, and I spend a lot of time in the US. I lived for 10 years in Idaho, and I have family in California and people in Ohio, and there's something about Americans that is very different from Canadians. Canadians are cold. I love my people, but we are cold. We will be very polite. We
won't.
we will not be in your face the way Americans are, but I'll tell you what, you better be next door to me for 10 years before I will actually believe that you are my friend. The Americans aren't like that. They're like, you've been in the house for 5 minutes?
You're
Okay.
my friend.
I don't think I like what you're saying, but we
Okay.
can still get along, and we can still somehow get the flag out, and we can have some fireworks, and there's so much that is quintessentially American in terms of, for example, the Statue of Liberty, the desire to feed populations. You've got astrologically 4 planets in Cancer that rule the American people. The U.S. of A.
Angela, I think you need to move abroad, then you'll see what.
Yeah, there's a good point.
You know, 'cause I grew up with an American mom in
Uh-huh.
Germany, right? So she fixed American food,
Yeah,
like
but
we
what
love
is
spaghetti
that?
and
What
meatballs.
is American food?
Spaghetti and meatballs. No German
That's
eats that.
That's Italian, and it's interesting because
No, actually, it's not.
well, do tell.
The spaghetti, yes, is Italian, but the meatballs is not.
There you
Meatball.
go. Exactly.
Well, the spaghetti is
Pizza is not Italian either. Pizza.
Oh,
yeah.
pizza is an
And I
island.
mean, I know we've got dibs on the hot dog, but I'm just looking at this going, yeah, I mean, there is
The rest of
nothing.
the world will forgive you.
There is nothing in the world like New York pizza, New York hot dog outside the Met.
Fabulous.
And it is like a whole nother thing to itself. So, and I know,
You got ramen noodles.
yeah, but, and it was, I was watching, and this really hit home last night. We were watching the English baking show,
Mm.
and they made pies. And I'm thinking homemade American apple pie, pumpkin pie. No, they made meat pies. Like
Yeah.
they put,
Yeah, shepherd's
Pig.
pie, stuff like that.
no, it was pork. See, that's exactly it.
No,
It
it's not
was,
shepherd's pie.
it was pork pie.
Yeah,
It was goose pie.
that's right.
It was meat pies and layered. They layer them like we layer wedding cakes.
That's right.
And it was,
That's right.
I'm looking at that going, this has got to be about as English cooking gets.
It is, but you know what? That's also all they do, because you go to England, there is not that much in England that is actually English cuisine. People don't go to England to eat the food.
No, they don't.
You don't hear about it, and
You
yet
don't
there
hear
are
haggis.
beautiful
Yeah,
restaurants.
and one of the gentlemen on the show did make a haggis pie. But
That's Scots. That's not.
oh
English.
yes, it is. He was Scott. No, he was Scott.
That's right.
And I
I
think
can't
this is,
imagine eating it, but anyway.
yeah. No, my husband and I were talking about it, and that is one thing on our will never eat list is haggis.
Yeah.
One of the things that we sat down though, and I'm reinventing food, rediscovering it. And this is, you're talking about corporate and the effects of World War II, and this is like an explosion of a topic that I just stumbled upon a couple weeks ago. During World War II, there was a lot of food processing and food businesses that came into existence. They were shipping and feeding the people overseas, the armies overseas. And when World War II ended, Eisenhower decided to do a United States convoy as a celebration. There were several of them, but one of them, there was deaths involved because the trip, it was basically a caravan from New York to San Francisco, and it was wow, we have no roadways, these are bad. So he instituted the national highway system as a result. Now, around the same time that Eisenhower built our highways, food businesses pulled out of the army. They lost all the soldiers because everyone was sent home, and they said, well, we don't want to go out of business. So let's start marketing to the American people. And they targeted mothers. Hey, you don't want to live in the kitchen, do you? Well, you can now make a TV dinner. You can now avoid slaving over the stove and pop this in for 5 minutes, and there you go. And it completely altered the way we cooked. It completely altered the way we think. And around the same
Everything's
time,
fast and everything's got
this
to
is
come
the start
fast.
of it. And this is where it got interesting. Because of this, and my grandmother is a testament to this, children were suddenly able to move away from parents. And she was born and raised in Florida. Her mother was there. Her mother's was there. But the highway was new. So she took that highway, and now she's up in New York. Suddenly there's that rift between mother to daughter. And she raised her children all alone. This is my grandmother. And it was because the highway system made this possible. And we got away from this massive food market because we started to embrace this business with selling food instead of nourishing our children. And I looked into Michael Pollan's cooked his shows with cooking, and it blew my mind up. I'm watching this going, wow. So I went out and I found a mill that sells stone ground mill. This is the same kind of milling process that were used during the Roman times. And I brought it into my home. This is like a month ago, and I started baking with this stone ground bread. I swear to you, it was the first time I tasted real bread in my life. It was.
I have to say to you, it's the same with what Annette was saying. You got to travel a bit because you go to Europe, you go to some of these other countries, and they have bread that is.
That's just it. It's lost in America, and that's what I mean by we have lost ourselves. We have lost our identity. Our identity. When you say home cooked meals, we think, oh, Hot Pockets. American cooking.
That's terrible, but true.
It is. American cooking is Hot Pockets. And we've gotten away from this culture, and it's sad.
You run down to Mickey D's for a worm burger.
Yeah, Mickey D's, and don't jest. My son did take a bite out, and we won't eat McDonald's to this day because KFC is our diet now, and it's just amazing to see as I bring this food back in, and I'm actually hunting down European recipes because I can't find them in the States. The way Europe cooks their bread, the way Europe does their food is completely different. It's a beautiful food process.
It's totally different. There is a different culture in Europe in terms of the way in which people appreciate different things. And I'll say that a lot of Eastern Europeans that I've spoken with have told me that they used to think that Canada and, of course, the U.S. was just the best place because they were going to make all this money. What they didn't understand was, you would make the money, but then as one woman said to me, all you people want to do on the weekend is have a barbecue and drink beer. Like, we want to go to the cafes, we go to theater, we go and we talk about politics, we talk about the meaning of life, we gather together, we have philosophy. And I believe that is more true. What would you say, Annette, to that?
Yeah, that's probably true.
I think so, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I came to the U.S., we didn't even have Starbucks. I mean, I worked downtown Chicago after I graduated, and there was no place to go and have a coffee. I was just happy beyond belief when Starbucks moved in like a block away, and there was a place where you could go and have a coffee. And sometimes my colleague and I would just go to Starbucks and sit there and proofread stuff for an hour just to get out of the office.
Yeah.
So now I have to ask,
to meet with people without, I mean, in the U.S., I guess people would, go out for drinks after work, but I wasn't into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's more of an alcohol culture in many ways. Yeah.
Huh. Is it a bad thing to do the barbecue and beer on a weekend?
Well,
no, see, that's your American culture. It's totally fine.
It's delightful, but I think what the Eastern Europeans were saying was that was all there was. So, I mean, and I love a
You're
barbecue.
speaking my language.
Yeah. Now I've offended all my American friends. I'm going to have to come down and have a barbecue with y'all and bring in the beer, so you'll know that I'll bring in the Canadian beer, so you'll drink real beer. None of that stuff that y'all drink down there.
No, I have Guinness.
If you're bringing anything from up there, make sure it's Screech rum.
No.
Oh, no, you don't want to touch that. That'll wreck you.
Oh, I've got a full bottle right in the house.
We're like beer, like comparing here. Like
we are.
Don't diss our guns or our beer.
It was great when I lived in Idaho. I will tell you that one of the tricks I had, which was kind of fun, was I could drink everybody under the table, all the guys, because I'm used to like 6 to 7% beer, and this is 3%. So I'm like, as long as I could be drinking all night. Like they were all, oh my God, you can drink us under the table.
You gotta experience German beer, the real German beer. Hefeweizen, it's about 20%.
Totally
It'll
different.
knock you off your socks.
I have to go now, but it's been a delight. Thank you all so
You
much.
too. Thank you, Charlene.
Bye-bye.